Hello everyone and welcome back to another lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you about the present simple tense. But before we begin the lesson, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up if you find the content interesting. Thank you. Now, let us begin. When it comes to the present simple tense, there are certain rules that you have to follow to use this tense correctly. The first rule is use the verb in its original form. You must remember to always use the verb in its original form. Look at the example on the right. The verb is boil. The verb boil is still in its original form. It is not boiled. The verb is boil. We have not added anything to the verb at the end. We have not added ed. We have not added ing. The verb is still in its original form. And the example is, I boil water with a kettle. I boil water with a kettle. So the verb boil has not changed from its original form. The second example is the verb go. Once more, the verb go is in its original form. We have not added es. We have not added ing. We have not added ne. The verb is still in its original form. You go to school early. You go to school early. Another example of a verb in its original form is watch. Watch. Now, I watch television every evening. I watch television every evening. Another verb is cook. It's still in its original form. I have not added anything to it. I cook my favorite meal on Sundays. I cook my favorite meal on Sundays. Another verb is play. It is in its original form. Play. I play football every Monday. I play football with my friends. So, the first rule of the present tense is that you have to use the verb in its original form. Cook, play, eat, sleep, climb, read. Okay? All these verbs must be used in their original form. Rule number 2. When you're using the present tense, you must add an S at the end of the verb when you use it with he, she, it, or a name of a person. Okay? When you use the verb with he, she, it, or a name of a person, you must add an S at the end of the verb. Look at the examples. Eats, sleeps, rains. He eats no breakfast. We cannot say he eat no breakfast. That is wrong, because when you use the verb eat with he, you must add an S. He eats no breakfast. She sleeps early, because we are combining the verb sleep with she. So we have to add an S after the verb sleep. It rains every day. We have to use S at the end of the verb rain because we are combining it with it. And if we combine the verb with the name of a person, we also have to use an S. For example, Peter plays football on Sundays. Peter plays. Peter is the name of a person. Plays. So you add S to the verb play. Peter plays football every Sunday. So that is rule number 2. When you have to use the verb with he or she or it or the name of a person, then you have to add an S to the verb. But when you go back to the first example, when you use the verb with I or you, then you do not add anything to the verb. I boil. You go. Not I boils. No, that is not correct English. Or you goes to school. No, that is not correct English, because when you combine I with a verb, it has to be in its original form. You do not add an S. The same way, when you use you with a verb, you don't combine it with an S. You leave the verb in its original form. Let us move on to rule number 3. Use the present tense to A. State a fact. So we always use the present tense to state a fact. For example, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Once more, we have to add S after boil because water is a name of something, okay? Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. We cannot say water boil. That is not correct English. We have to add an S after boil. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Remember we said we only use the verb in its original form when you combine it with I or you. So when you state a fact, then you always use the present tense. Okay? I'll give you another example. The sun rises in the morning. That is a fact. The sun rises in the morning. So, the sun is the name of a thing. So, I have to add an S to the verb rise. Rise is the original form of the verb. R-I-S-E. So I have to add an S to that particular verb. Or another example, the sun, sets at 6 o'clock in the evening. The sun sets at 6 o'clock in the evening. So once more, I am going to add an S after the verb set because I am talking about the sun. The sun is the name of a thing. Now, 3B. Use the present tense to state that something is a habit which happens often. So when you want to state that something happens often, then you use the present simple tense. Maybe there is something you do every day. It is a habit. When you want to explain that to somebody, you use the present simple tense. Look at the example. She watches a lot of movies on Netflix. She watches a lot of movies on Netflix. So, once more, the verb watch, we add es at the end, okay? We add es at the end because we are combining the verb with she. She watches a lot of movies on Netflix. I will give you another example. The baby cries every day. The baby cries every day she's hungry. Okay, so in this case, cry, I add an S to it. She cries, okay, because I'm talking about the name of a person, and that is a baby. Now, again, another habit could be another example. She prays every day. She prays every day. She eats every morning. She cooks for the family. She reads her favorite book. Okay, so if there is something that you do and it is a habit, you do it every day, then you use the present simple tense. Rule number 4. Always use the present tense if the following words appear in a sentence. So when you see these words in a sentence, you must use the present tense. And the words are always, often, sometimes, every day, every week. And look at the examples on the right. She always sleeps late. In that sentence, we have the word always. We also have the word she. Remember rule number 2. Because we are combining she with the verb sleep, we must add an S. She always sleeps late. If I was to replace she with I would say, I always sleep late. Remember rule number 1. Because when you combine I with a verb, you don't add an S. She always sleeps late. I always sleep late. You always sleep late. Remember rule number 1. The next example. My mother calls me often. My mother calls me often. In that sentence, we have the word often. So we have to use the present tense. You have the verb call, which you combine with the noun my mother. Remember rule number 2. My mother is the name of a person. It's referring to a person. So you have to add an S to the verb call. My mother calls me often. The next example, it rains every day. In that sentence, you have the word every day. So that means you have to use the present tense. But also, you have the word it. Remember rule number 2. So because you have the word it, you combine it with the verb rain by adding an S at the end of the verb rain. Okay? It rains every day. And finally, you have John reads a new book every week. Rule number 4. You have the word every week. That means you have to use the present tense. And then rule number 2. Add S at the end of the verb when you use it with a name of a person. In that sentence, the name of a person is John. So we have to add an S at the end of the verb read. We cannot say John read a new book every week. No, that is not correct English because that is not rule number 1. Rule number 1 is when you use the verb with I or you, then you don't add an S. You leave the verb in its original form. So, this brings us to the end of the lesson. Remember, we use the present simple tense to state a fact or to talk about something that you do often, you do every day. And remember the rules. When you have the words always, often, sometimes, every day, and every week in a sentence, use the present tense. And remember, use the verb in its original form when you combine it with I or you. But when you combine it with he, she, it, or a name of a person or a thing, then you must add an S at the end of the verb. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section. And if you found this lesson useful, please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, subscribe to the channel, and give the video a thumbs up. Have you done that? Thank you very much and see you in the next lesson. Bye bye.